Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and welcome to this video. This video is going to be a React Forms masterclass. It's all about the different ways of handling React Forms. So to get started with that, I'm going to create a new React project. So let me just close all this up and do npx create React app, and we'll just call this React Forms. Okay. And I did npm by accident when I should have wrote npx, and there we go. Now that's gonna do the thing. So that's gonna go, build the files. Cool. Okay. So there's a couple different ways you can do forms. There's really two main patterns. There's a controlled form and an uncontrolled form. And the idea is an uncontrolled form, which is what we're going to do first, is that the form is just a form element, and we're just going to kind of grab the value from it, like you would grab the value from any form by, selecting it on the DOM and then grabbing its form value. Okay, so let's just first get this React app going. So React Forms, let's open up the app component. Let me actually run this in terminal, npm start to run the React app. Oops, I gotta be in the right folder. So cd React Forms, npm start. I hope my throat's a little coarse, just woke up. I should drink a cup of coffee first. Okay, but let me clear out this div. And let's just, make a basic form. So we'll just say a form, okay, with just like one input. So input type equals text. Okay, let me make that self-closing. And then let's also put a submit button. Type equals submit. And then we'll just say value the submit button. Okay. So basically, bottom line is this. I have a form. It has an input, and there's a button. And I can type in the form, but right now it does nothing. So first thing I need to do is I need something to kind of track this DOM element, this input DOM element. So React has a hook. Let me just get rid of all this. Okay, React has a hook called useRef. What it does, it allows you to create a variable that acts as a reference to a DOM element in your JSX. So we'll just say const useRef from React. Oops, I'm mixing my import methods here. I need a cup of water. Okay, that's much better. Not perfect, but better. So what I'm going to do is, again, what we need to do is bring this in correctly. So that's going to be import useRef from React. Okay, so that brings in useRef, and what I want to do is, like any hook, I'm going to use it before to declare some stuff. So I'm going to declare a variable. We'll call it the input ref, because it's a ref that we plan on using to refer to the input. And we use the useRef hook to create it, and we're just going to initialize it as null, because we don't want it to be worth anything at the moment. It's just null. The way we give it value is we're going to attach it to, let's say, the input in particular. Let's actually attach it to the form element. There's different ways you can do it. So we can call this a form ref. Okay, so there's the form reference, and then I just sit there and I'll do ref equals form ref. So now if I console log that ref, let's see what I have. So I'll type in the thing, and let me open up my terminal. Okay, and then here we have the thing that we just created. So this is the form ref. If we look inside of it, you see there's a current, which is the element. That property is the actual DOM element that you've selected. So instead of using like jQuery to use like that $ thing, or using like query selector, this is how you select DOM elements in React. Generally, it should be used very sparingly because you really want React to control the DOM. So that way you don't accidentally disturb that sort of React re-render cycle and cause any weird side effects. But, you know, for a simple form, this could be very appropriate. And as you can see here, there's an array of inputs. So I can see like there's form 0, form 1. So theoretically, let's see here. If I were to console log form 0 and then say dot value, see, I get undefined. Okay, so that means I'm not accessing that value correctly. So let's go back here. Current form ref. Now the ref kind of broke. Let's try to refresh that again. Current no. Interesting. What happened there? Okay, well, let's come back to that. What happens though is what we want is an event to happen when the form is submitted. So we'll create a function to handle the submission of the form. So we'll say, I'll just use the function syntax. Function handle submit. And again, with any kind of form handle submit function, we want to receive the event. And first thing we want to do is do an event.prevent default to prevent the page from refreshing. Okay, that's just a thing we have to do with form tags, because the way that form tags were originally built into HTML is that they were kind of made to make a request from the browser, which kind of causes the page to refresh or try to go elsewhere, which is not what we want to happen. And now here I'll console.log the ref. Okay, because I have a feeling what's happening is that sometimes it's logging. What happens is that when I refresh the page on that initial render, this is happening before the JSX render, so I'm getting that null. So I'm going to get rid of this console log and instead rely on this console log from when I submit the form. So I type some stuff in, I hit submit, and see right now it's still refreshing. It means I did something wrong. And what I did wrong is this event handler, this is fine, but I forgot to actually attach it to the form tag. I actually have to tell it when you submit the form, that's the function you're going to run. Handle submit. There we go. And see, there's the form. Okay, now I can access its values. So the idea is, but with a useRef, when you're using this uncontrolled form, the form just is a form. And then it's at the time you need the information, you grab the data using the refs. So for example, now let's see here, if I were to go to current form, and I forgot the current part too. Current, and then I were to do /0, there should be a value property here. QRSTUV. Theoretically, it's there. Form value LP. Let me go down any further. Outer HTML. Form. So let's see here. We go to the ref. See, it says we have these two inputs. So I should be able to grab the value of the input somewhere. So let's take a look at the property. Usually it's a property called value, but I'm not seeing it. So maybe it's somewhere else. So no name input, next sibling, next element sibling. Okay, that's just the other input. Oh, I see. I had to drop it down here. There it is, value. Cool. So then theoretically what I could do is I could just use this ref and grab all the values. So over here in this console log, I could console log .current 0 dot value. Okay, and now I type in the form. Just go all the way back to the bottom. I hit submit, and see at console I have access to the value of the form. This is generally like an easier way of handling a form. The only problem with this method is that, again, you are circumventing sort of like the render cycle, which is fine depending on what you're trying to do. But also you can't really do like validations as you go, and I'll show you what I mean when we do a controlled form, which is a bit more complicated, but gives you a little more flexibility on kind of having like validations as people fill out a form and things like that. Okay, so again, what we notice here is I create a hook, a ref hook. I attach that ref to a form element, and now I have access to that form via that variable wherever I need to use it, in this case in the handle submit function. Okay, now a controlled form would work like this. Instead, I would use the useState hook. Okay, or some sort of way of tracking state. And basically what I would do is I declare some state for the form. So we'll say form state equals useState. And then what I would do is I would have to create a object with a property for each input. So I need to give for this to work, I have to give each input a name property. So we'll just call this name, okay, we'll call it input, okay, input. And so that input's going to be named input because I don't feel very creative right now. And the default value for that input will be slash. So what happens here is called a controlled form because you are controlling it with the state. So what's going to happen is I'm saying here name value. So I'm going to bind the value to the form state.input to that particular property on that state. So I'm saying, hey, whenever this input should always match whatever is here. So literally, if I were to change the state and I would make it like dog. Okay, let me refresh the page. Dog. Why did that not work? Input text name value form state dot input. And let me just see here. I mean, I shouldn't be able to type in there right now. Oh, I can type in there. Okay. We'll come back to that. So let's see here. Components. Let me just make sure that this is doing what I think it's doing. Okay, so I look in here. I see the state. The state has the input of dog. Oh, I see what I did. You can tell I have just woken up. This should be form state, set form state. Okay, there we go. So now I should not, yep, there, now I can't type in the box. And the reason why I can't type in the box is because I'm constantly telling this input that it should be the dog property on this state. So since the dog property on this state is dog, even if I type in, it immediately changes it back to dog. Okay, so bottom line is I can't change the input because the thing that's controlling it doesn't change. So that means anytime I type in the box, I need to somehow change that state so that way that change can be reflected in the form. So what I need to do is create what's called a handle change function. Again, you can call it whatever you want, but the convention is to call it handle change. It also receives the event. And usually people do this in one line. I'll show you how to do it in one line. But let me just show you sort of like what's happening the long way so you can see what's going on. So typically the pattern here is that first you make a copy of state. Because again, you can't just alter the state because then the component doesn't re-render. The component only re-renders when you call the useState hook and pass it a new value. But because the state is an object, if I were to just alter that object and then pass that to useState, nothing would happen because technically it's the same object. Even though the properties have changed, it's the same object. It's kind of like if I were to swap out my couch in my living room, it's still the same house. So React's gonna be like, I'm not gonna re-render this. So I need a whole new object. So what I'm gonna do is make a new object that has all the same properties. So I make a copy, so I'm gonna say const new state equals, and then I'll make a new object and spread the form state in there. And then we want to update the property And basically, we want to update it on this new object. Now, which property do we want to update? Imagine you have like 100 different form inputs. Well, you don't have to make one of these functions for every single input. That would be tedious. So what we do is we try to grab the property's name. As long as the property's name input matches what it is in the object or state, then we're in good shape. Because all I have to do is do event.target.name. That's going to grab this word input, and we're going to be essentially altering that property. And just say that we want that to equal the event.target.value, because we want to equal whatever's typed in the input box. Because again, the event tells us who is triggering the event, and that's the event.target property. So this event.target is this input, and I'm accessing its name property and its value property. Okay. Then update the property, and then what I do is I update state. Okay, and then what I do here is I just say useFormState equals the new state, because I'm passing it this new object, so it's going to re-render. That new object has the altered property, so now when I type in the form, oh, I actually have to again add it here. So I have to say onChange. And here's the thing to keep in mind with React. React's onChange event is different than the normal onChange event in the browser. So onChange in the browser basically gets triggered when your form is out of focus. So basically I have to click on the form and then click outside of the form for the event to trigger. React changes this for some reason, and instead of making it like on input or something, and what it does is that it triggers on every keystroke. So if I do onChange equals handle change, okay, now I can type and see it's updating the state. I can see that right over here. If you see where my mouse pointer is, I can see that every time I type, that state is updating. Because every time I type in that input box, this function is running, updating the state, which then updates how this form appears, because this form is going to show whatever's in my state. So it's not that I'm really typing in the box. I'm typing, it's updating the state, and then the state is updating the form. The state is what controls the form, thus a controlled form. Okay, awesome. So this is like sort of the long way of doing it. Okay, now people will also try to do this in one line like this. And once you understand it, this is actually probably the easier way to do it. To event, and what you do is just do this. You say you're going to update the state, so same thing as like line 21. Then I'm going to create a new object, so curly brackets. I copy the old object, form state, and then add the new property, or add the altered property, event.target.name, event.target.value. So essentially this does the exact same thing that I did here in 3 lines. Okay, but again, if this is the first time you see this, this may seem a little terse and hard to kind of appreciate. This kind of shows you exactly what's going on there. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to understand that every time I'm typing in the form, I'm updating the state, so that way it updates the form. So now if I go back to my handle submit, I could access those form values through that form state. So I can console.log form state. Okay, and again, here I'll put here from ref, and here from state. Okay, and the cool thing about that is that, again, both of these work now. So if I type in the input box, and then I hit the submit button, like going back to the console, okay, I'm getting the same thing. So again, the state is this object. So again, in there, there's the input property. So there would be a property for each input. Okay, again, or I can again go through the ref where I have that array. Now the benefit of using a controlled form is that I can inject validations in this handle change function, because since I'm updating the state on every change in the input box, what I can do is I can maybe inject some logic here to check, like, make sure that the string isn't longer than like 4 letters. So there's 2 ways I could do this. I could just do this manually through JavaScript. So I could do something like this, like wrap this in an if statement. Okay, and say like if form state dot input is dot length is greater than 5, okay, then we'll alert long string. Too long. Okay, we could do some other action, but you know, right now it's too early for me to think of something more creative. Okay, so I could do something like that. And cool. So now what happens here is, let's refresh the page. I start typing. So it starts with dog because that's what I initialized this state at. So let me just bring that back to an empty string. Okay, now if I start typing, everything's okay. Oh, that didn't, oh, there we go. Too long. So eventually the state is 5 letters or more than 5 letters. So when I hit that, it says too long. So I can create validations where it says like, hey, don't do that, or I can try to disable the button, all sorts of things. You could just do it manually like that. That's fine. Okay. But a cool thing about HTML is that form inputs actually have like validation features. So like if I do like input pattern attribute, okay, I can set up this pattern attribute to look for different patterns. Okay, so which makes life a lot easier. Okay, so I could just create like a regular expression in those question marks. So let's say you have to type the word cat in here. Okay, so I can say pattern equals cat. Okay, now what I can do then is that now the form has an element to check for its validity. Okay, so now I can be like event.target. So let's just do this. Check validity. And say like console.log event.target, which should be the input. And then the target should have a function called check validity, which should return true or false. Okay. And then we'll see that in the console log as we type in the box. Okay. And I can have it like, so true. Okay. So let me just see here. Refresh. Now if I hit type, false, 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 false. But if I type in the word cat, now it's true. So now imagine this. Let's create a piece of state called valid. So const valid set valid that keeps track of the validity. Set valid equals useState. Okay, and it's going to initialize as false. Okay, and then what we do is on the input box we can also disable the input box, or specifically the input button. So we put disabled, and then we're going to say it equals the opposite of valid. So if it's not valid, it's disabled. Okay, so we put that there. Okay, so that's all fine and good. So see, now the button is like all grayed out and disabled. And if I do this, if I go blah, 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 that doesn't work. But if I suddenly type in cat, well, I should be able to click the button, but that's not working yet. Oh, it's because I never actually put in the logic to change the state. Okay, so valid here. So again, over here, I need to change this to check if it's valid. So if, okay, like if check, or actually I don't even need to do that. I just changed set valid to whatever event.target dot check validity is. Okay, and what that's going to do is keep updating the state to true or false, and then the button will change when I type the right thing. So there, it's valid at 0 because it's always valid at a blank empty form. But then if I start typing, that doesn't match the pattern. But if I type in cat, that matches the pattern, so the button is active. So again, I can use I can take advantage of this to really easily make it where like the form doesn't work if they didn't type in the right stuff. I just make sure to check the patterns, and the form's not valid, they cannot submit the button. And this way you don't have to actually have them like submit the button and then they get a message that something is wrong. You can take advantage. HTML has tools for you. Okay? And then again, you can style that button if in a disabled state. That's a thing. So yeah, that's a cool thing you can do. Now when it comes to forms, there are some things out there that will help make this easier for you. Okay, so if we go to npmjs.com, there's a library that I created, Merced React Hooks, which has all sorts of really helpful hooks that you can use. Okay, so let me just look for the one specifically about forms. Task runner, useFormState. Okay, I think I passed it. Use fetch, use local storage, use FormState. So here you go. So basically what this one does, it actually creates the handle change function for you, which may not be too useful if you're doing validations, because then in that case it's already created for you. So basically you can't inject the validations in there, but maybe I'll go back and refactor this so that way you can customize the handle change function a little bit more. But yeah, this gives you just sort of the boilerplate handle change function so that way you can set up the form pretty quickly. So essentially what you do is kind of like you'd set state up, but except it's giving you the data, a handle change function, because you don't really need the set state function because the handle change does what you need for the form, and then a reset form method so that way you can easily reset the form on the way out. So then you can just call reset form on your handle submit, and then the form gets emptied out. Okay, that should work for most standard forms. Okay, cool. And then there's Formik. Formik's probably the most popular form library. Okay, here's Formik. And this works in a very similar way. Let's find the documentation. Get started. Yep. Tutorial. Just see. I just want to see a quick code example. There we go. So in this case, it would be the same idea. You have Formik, and then what you would do is you would use this component Formik, and then you would pass it all these values, like the initial values of the form, any validations you want to check, the onSubmit function, all that stuff, and then within that form you would then define your form. It takes a second to kind of get used to how it works, but essentially that's kind of how that works. So that is cool. Okay. And again, this one makes it a bit easier because again, a lot of that handle submit logic and a lot of that other logic is kind of done for you. You just kind of have to get used to the pattern, because see what you're doing here is that you're defining a function that in the middle. So it kind of works like kind of React request, where you have to put a function in the middle as a child, and then that's kind of how it works, because it's taking the function as its child and then it's passing it into its inner logic. But yeah, that's another option you have. And I'll leave it at that. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. That was a React Forms Masterclass. Have a great day and enjoy.